All right. Yeah. So today I wanted to put some of my thoughts out there regarding the topics listed in the title, but I'll definitely be like touching on a lot of other subjects. It's just that there's like a lot of intertwined concepts that I couldn't really list all of them in the title or whatnot, and I will only remember them and think of whichever topic like as it comes up, because there's a lot. I'm never able to really figure out how to talk about like discrete topics at a time. They're always pretty intertwined for me. So yeah, mainly just sharing the thoughts I've had lately about, mainly the topic of like um, accepting, accepting the way people are, I guess. I mean, I've talked about this before, just how I came up, I spent a lot of time really believing in like, all these ideas of like liberating people or saving people or all of those things, fixing all the things that are wrong in the world, and really having to face the conundrum or the dilemma that you know a lot of the problems are created by people, whether they're aware of it or not, and just by different things people do and all of that stuff. So, I can't really fix them, from my perspective without people being willing and able to like fix themselves, you could say. I mean, that sounds, whatever, but, I think, there's a reason a lot of different like kind of spiritual views, religions, whatever you want to call them, have concepts like whether it's like sin and virtue, or they are kind of critical to some extent of like human behavior or whatever. Because I think there is something to that you know that people can often are often like their own worst enemy, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But it's taken me time to really accept that and come to terms with that, and so related to trying to accept that, I've been like thinking about human behavior, the human condition, and all of that. Like I've said before, I'm not trying to like make absolute assumptions about like quote unquote human nature or whatever. But I think you can make observations just based on like at least what we see in front of us now and all that, um, and things that seemingly have been described for a long time. Maybe as far back as just the as long as humans have been around or whatever. Um, and yeah, I mean, as far as bread and circuses go, I think this is I've been thinking about also apparently it's what's called the Super Bowl coming up this weekend, I guess. And things like that that we're familiar with, at least if you're within the U.S. or whatever. You know how big the Super Bowl is, and I've always just found it really bizarre, to be honest. Like, I don't really. I mean, yeah, it's always been hard for me to accept like how things like that can be so pervasive in society, and people just find um, so much to be attached to in that, so much to be attracted to and interested in, and I really don't get it. Like, I don't have a problem with like a sport in and of itself, but just the culture that people create around professional sports or even non-professional sports. Obviously, I mean, even college football, American football is really big in the US and all that. So yeah, it's like, I don't know, the things that people choose to value and put their time and energy in is kind of strange to me. I mean, it has been strange to me for a long time, and that's where I kind of wanted to bring in like the concept of religion that I've been thinking about. Like I mentioned, there are these like concepts of sin and virtue, um, and in Buddhism, which is something I've been like looking into a lot recently, learning a lot about. They kind of call, well, to me, it's kind of similar to like sin. Um, well, what they call it is like defilement and delusion within the human condition, and you know, to me, it's like I went through as a kid like being forced into a religion, Catholicism specifically, and I really had like a negative reaction to that, and I went through a whole phase of being super anti-religious and all of that, and I really saw it as like these rules that are just stupid, and I don't need rules, and or people don't need these kinds of rules or whatever. But I mean, to be honest, as time goes on, like there is a lot of sense in it. I'm in certain things about it, not all of it, in my opinion, but a lot of it is fairly sensible. Like in terms of whether you want to look at it as like sin and virtue or vices and virtue, or as in Buddhism like defilement and delusion. To me, like my interpretation of it is that it is trying to tell people to be moderate, right, about a lot of things, right? It's not saying you can't have any of certain of whatever thing, but to have moderation. And so, like whether it's like ego, lust, gluttony, greed, all like all the sins, right? I mean, there's it's hard to deny that if someone's too indulgent in one of those things, that it doesn't have a negative effect on just themselves as a person, and probably on other people too. But even just like focusing on the individual, like it will probably lead to a lot of like suffering, basically, and that's where like in Buddhism, like they do say that those kinds of like overindulgences are what leads to suffering, or that attachment to certain things leads to suffering, like attachment to whatever it is, to having certain status, to having material things, to having even like love or whatever. When people become attached to things, like their passion about it is what can lead to suffering, and clearly also it can lead to positive things, right? And that's kind of the dilemma. Like, if it's easy to say like, yeah, if you're not, if you're not passionate about things, then you won't do something stupid over it. But there could be a good side to it too, of course. Like whether it's like a relationship, if you're passionate about it, it could be a good thing for whoever, for you and for other people involved in that. But it can also have its negative side, and that's what's difficult to me about like trying to navigate all these things, because yeah, there's it is like a dialectic. There are good and bad sides to like pretty much everything, I guess. And so and that's why like when it comes to religion, like yeah, I don't like when people try to make excuse me, try to make certain things out to be like 100% bad or 100% good, right? Because it's probably somewhere in the middle. But yeah, as like in terms of looking at like the sin thing, as more of like a call to moderation and not necessarily saying something is 100% good or evil, makes more sense. And this is kind of like a weird example, but I was kind of like remembering some of these like Christian, those people who go out and like stand on street corners and hold up signs and all that stuff. Usually Christians that I've seen. Well, not always Christians, but typically. And I was thinking about this one sign. When I was like younger, and I was like in my anti-religious atheist phase, and I remember like I would debate people, like debate Christians and all that, and there was always this whole dichotomy of like the atheist versus the fundy, I guess people called them fundies, fundamentalist Christians, and the anti-theists or the anti-religionist atheists, and so like one of those things I remember seeing is like, I don't think I saw this. I didn't see this in person, but like online, there was like a picture of somebody with a sign that said like, you're going to hell, and then it had like all these different, categories. It had like what cohabitators, fornicators, homosexuals, um, and then it also had like sports fanatics and gossipers on there, and so I was thinking lately, like, again, I don't agree that whatever it is, sex outside marriage is inherently bad, or that, homosexuality is inherently bad. But as far as the sports fanatic thing and gossip goes, like, that's one of those things, those are things that, it's easy to say, like, um, oh, that's ridiculous, like, it's harmless, like, how could anyone see that as, why would you list that as like something that would send you to hell even? I mean, not that, again, the other things shouldn't necessarily mean somebody should go to hell, but, you know, those other things have always been in contention as far as morality goes or whatever, but the sports fan and gossip thing, like, it made me really think that, like when I thought about it recently, like, yeah, that it kind of is getting back to that idea of like, um, people not having, the ability to limit themselves, and so they do get lost in these things that, seem really harmless, but when you overindulge in them, they can be just as bad as anything. That's where, like, the idea of bread and circuses come in, because, yeah, if people are just so into these things that they're not focusing at all, not doing anything at all, in other parts of their life, whether it's like genuinely, God forbid, helping people or trying to improve, people's situations, um, or like I said, the Super Bowl. It's like, of all the things that could be getting people's money and attention, it's not great in my opinion. And like I said, even just coming from my standpoint of like having this desire to like help people and whatever, like even like I talked about before, like I don't necessarily believe in like this, I don't claim it's like this super morally correct thing to do, but just something that I wish that I could do, just because like I like to see people happy and not suffering, or I think there are things that could be changed if enough people really put effort into it. They're not set in stone, they're not a given, but they do require people taking the initiative to change them or whatever. So yeah, it's an uphill climb when people are putting their energy and time into all these other things. Um, and of course, from like a religious standpoint, their intention is to redirect people's energy to like that religion or that ideology. And um, but yeah, as far as like I said, as far as moderation goes, it makes sense. And the problem that I see, again, it's easy to dismiss things and say like, oh, it's harmless. There's, what's so bad about being a sports fan, watching, the Super Bowl, or even like whatever gossip, or all this other stuff. But you know, for me, the thing is that most people don't seem to be able to like accurately determine how much is too much. I guess, I mean, for lack of a better way of saying it, right? Like, I think people are not a good, not good at really, like, honestly, assessing themselves, like whether something is whether they're doing something in moderation, or whether it's really taking over, you know, their life or their effort, or you know, leading them. Because it's like, you can have an interest, but at what point, is the interest leading you? I mean, that could be said about other things, same thing, like lust. Like, it's not bad in of itself, but at what point is it driving you? Like, are you a slave to that emotion, or to whatever base, like, desire that, that people have, whether it's like, yeah, like greed, ego, whatever, and so, yeah, I mean, if people don't have a way to determine that, then, what else is going to happen but for it to, like, tend to spiral, out of control, or just become, just grow exponentially over time, like snowball. Excuse me. But, yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. That's why it's like, I can understand what religion, those aspects of religion try to do. Um, and, as far as like the word religion, I know people have like talked about how it means, like the etymology of the word religion means to hold back. And, I've heard people say it in like a really negative way, like, oh, it means to hold back, and so it holds back progress, and it holds back intelligence and all that. But really, to me, I think he could say it means like to hold back, right? Those base desires that people have, to keep things in moderation, right? To not be excessive in whatever way, I mean, and again, to me that makes sense, even as someone who, you know I'm not, yeah, I mean, I'm not religious. I mean, my relationship to religion is like, I don't know how to describe it, kind of in flux or something. I mean, I'm not against it, and I'm not for it. I think, like I mean, obviously, like I'm saying, I think there are good points within it, within a lot of them, and there's certain similarities with different religions, and they just take different forms, you know. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's hard to I can't dismiss all of it. Um, and that's why it's hard, because yeah, not everyone needs rules like that, right? Um, Not everyone, needs to be, told a story about like going to hell or whatever, going to heaven, based on following certain rules. But frankly, maybe other people do. Maybe, maybe a lot of people do need that. And if it helps them do that, then it does. It doesn't matter whether I or someone else, who's not religious, thinks that it's better, that they should just do those things without believing in whatever stories. Um, but yeah, it doesn't matter what anyone thinks about it. I mean, if it does that for them, then it does. And I think, that's why I've been getting annoyed lately with some of these like atheists I've been watching on like YouTube a little bit, and it kind of has taken me back to, like the late 2000s, when I was really into, that whole like atheist YouTube thing. I actually even made some videos, which is embarrassing to think about now. I was like 16 or something, or even 15, like back on the early days of YouTube, if you can remember that shit. It was very different. But I mean, yeah, I think I made videos with like copyrighted music on them, and they stayed up for a while. Not like today, it just get immediately taken off and taken down. So yeah, very different times. But anyway, like yeah, I find it just annoying when people, from the atheist, not anti-religion side, just say like, oh, you don't need religion, you don't need this and that, you don't need a God to, whatever. And it's like, well, how can you really say that? I mean, maybe they do, whether you like it or not. Um, because just looking around, it's pretty clear that most people, like I said, don't have a lot of self-discipline. They don't have that ability to determine when something is going too far, when they're overindulging in something. And that's why, I guess they benefit from having someone else tell them what those parameters are, and, whatever people think about it, if it helps them, it does. You know, um, because yeah, even people who are adhering to certain religions will still struggle with that, because yeah, it's a difficult thing about humanity. Like whatever the thing is, whatever the desire is or the attachment is, it's hard for people to control that. For a lot of people, some can, some can't. I mean, that's why you know over time, yeah, obviously these different issues where people say like take for example like the whole sex ed thing with obviously it's been a very controversial thing for decades now, like, oh, you should only teach abstinence, or no, you should give more options, and because teenagers will have sex regardless of what you tell them. And that's what I'm saying. Like that's one of those issues that is a good example, because it's like, again, it's like, do you try to like make people adhere to this hard standard of like abstinence only, or like, do you think that will be better for people if they just follow those rules, or can people make their own choices and all of that, and set their own parameters. And again, it's tricky because yeah, some people struggle with it, like clearly, when people can make their own decisions, sometimes they make decisions they regret. They make decisions that make their life really difficult. you know if you've known anyone who's become like a teen parent, or someone who's like the child of a teen parent, doesn't sound fun. I don't know I mean, I've known people in that situation, and it doesn't sound like fun. So yeah, it's like, you can't completely discount the people who are trying to, you know have people adhere to the hard and the straight and narrow rules, or whatever you want to call them, because that could help some people, right? And that's why it's really a difficult line to walk, like between, again, like the reality that whether you try to make people fit into a certain mold, like follow certain rules, that they won't, but that other people like could benefit if they do follow those rules. It's tough. um, and so this logic, I think applies also with, what I'm calling the bread and circuses, right? With just entertainment, like not even getting into like I said, things that are difficult already to deal with, relationships and all of that, but even just entertainment, like I said, sports, media, technology, the internet. And I've really been thinking about how much the world of media and like obviously the internet have changed even since I was a kid, and I feel like it's really changed a lot, and it's become just so all consuming. Um, Thinking about things like Netflix, right? We have, you know, we have this all these streaming services that, first of all, didn't exist, say 20 plus years ago because a lot of people still didn't have like high speed internet that would even allow people to stream like that, stream video specifically. I know I didn't. I still had dial up in 2003, and I couldn't do shit on the internet I had at home other than just playing, text pages, and I couldn't even listen to music on the internet when I was a kid on dial up. So, we have this totally unlimited streaming ability, whether it's Netflix or YouTube or whatever else. That's just obviously completely unlimited entertainment, all the time. When back then, we had cable TV, obviously, but even that, even that was, still not as much content. I mean, there was still a finite number of channels. I mean, depending how many cable channels you had. And even at like in the middle of the night, there would be times when most channels would go to like these paid, what did they fucking call it? The paid programming or some shit. Just some nonsense like at 2 a.m. If you're up at 2 a.m., there's just this nonsense on most of the channels. So yeah, I don't know. It just seems like it's gotten so much easier to get lost in the entertainment, right? And like movies, right? If God rest its soul, Blockbuster, if you remember Blockbuster or any other similar stores where you had to, pay by the movie to rent like a DVD or, God forbid, a VHS tape for a few days or whatever it was, up to a week, depending how new the title was, the movie was. And yeah, I mean, I don't remember exactly how much that cost. I mean, I imagine it was like $4 or $5 maybe per movie. But even that is still, I mean, that's still only how many. I mean, unless you have a shit ton of money to spend on, however many movies. But it's like, you know what I mean? There is a natural limit there to some degree. It's not what we have now. Like I said, just absolute infinite choices, infinite hours of entertainment at our fingertips. Facilitated mostly by the internet, and yeah, I mean, and with the internet, there's like a lot of other things, not even just the movies and TV. There's gaming, which is another thing that I feel like has changed a lot. From when I was a kid, and I was into video games when I was like a kid. I had like a Nintendo 64. I had a Super Nintendo and Game Boy and all that. And it's like, yeah, I mean, even that had a natural limit because first of all, you had to play it on a well, I had to play it on a shared TV, so that would already limit how much I could play that. And it was still actually more conducive to like still like playing against friends who were there with you in person. Like I would play video games with my friends, and now you can again obviously play games with people on the internet who could be on the other side of the world, and um, you know the kinds of things. I mean, I don't even know where to begin with like the internet gaming culture, but I don't know. I'm really not into it. I just find it as such like navel gazing and just like grown ass adults who just act like 12-year-olds, and somehow that's supposed to be endearing. It's just, I honestly, I do find it disturbing. Like, I try not to quote unquote judge people or whatever, but I don't know what else to say. Like, the amount of grown ass adults that are just like, not even just, the amount of gaming, because like I said, clearly a lot of people are doing a lot of things to excess, but to just straight up be acting like 12-year-olds, when you're like 25, 35, 45, is creepy. I don't know. I mean, not creepy in, that way, but just weird. Like, I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, this is what's happening to people, and it's hard to see good in that. I don't know. Like, maybe that's too. Yeah, I'm becoming like, get off my lawn now, but yeah, I don't know. So, like, whether it's that, whether it's the sports games that people are so obsessed with, and like, what does that have to do with anything in reality? I don't know. I mean, and that's even on the surface. Like, there's, people out there who believe the sports games are all rigged, and like, you don't even have to go that deep. I mean, like, this one Buddhist monk, I watched some of his stuff because I find his perspective interesting, and I've been looking into that, into Buddhism, like I mentioned. And he mentioned, how you don't even have to go deep to that point of, like, if you've been in the so-called truth or whatever move, in those spaces, there's always people who talk about, like, the occult and the symbolism. It's like, you don't even have to go that far, or that certain people are controlling media and controlling this and that. You don't even have to go that far. Just the fact that people are so obsessed with it in and of itself. Like, it doesn't even matter if there's so-called satanic or occult ritual or symbology or whatever the fuck else in it. I mean, like I said, just the way people become obsessed with it and put all their energy into it alone, like, even just on the surface level, is already, it already is what it is. You don't even need all that other shit. Like, it's not like it would be great for grown-ass adults to be obsessed with gaming, obsessed with entertainment and TV shows on Netflix, or whatever else. It's not like it would be better if it only had, like, Christian symbology or Christian message. I mean, I don't, because, yeah, I mean, having a Christian message in and of itself wouldn't change anything, if people are still focusing only on that. And frankly, I mean, speaking of that, I mean, I think religion and those things can be used themselves as bread and circuses. I mean, it just depends on your approach. Like I said, there's so many people who, they claim to follow certain religions, but how do they use it? Do they use it just as a cultural identity, to fit in with their community, to truly try to maintain, equilibrium in their life, moderation, or, reduce suffering and all of that? Or is it just, like, again, just something to be, to lose themselves in the I don't know, all the mysticism or the whatever else? I mean, it just depends how someone approaches it. I mean, that's why it's like, it can be so many different things to so many different people. And yeah, I don't think it can be said to be all one thing or another. It just depends on how a person, utilizes it. Because, yeah, I can see how it can be a really good tool, like, to maintain, like, some self-discipline, but it can also be, like, itself just another prop, like another identity that's, doesn't mean much. Or whatever. And atheism can be that too. I mean, that's what I got to with the whole atheist thing. Like, it became itself, another club, you know, just yeah, basically like a circle jerk of like, how everyone just congratulating themselves on how great they are for being atheist. The books and the content, the whatever. I mean, and I found over time a lot of like those popular so-called new atheists at that time, the late 2000s or whatever, to be really full of shit in other ways, and that's the thing too for me. It's like they want to talk about how they're so rational, like they're big on that word, like rational, and believing in God is not rational. And it's like, well, what's the damn difference if you still have other beliefs that are just as like irrational, or just based in nothing but your own like belief, like your own self-satisfaction. You want to believe in them, you want to believe in like the superiority of Western civilization, which a lot of these new atheists really have an attachment to that. They're the people always saying like, the West is great because it's secular, and those horrible people in the Middle East or wherever who are religious are just savages, and it's just such a childishly um, you know unsophisticated way to look at how things work. Because one thing that's said about a lot of Islamic countries, like obviously for all the things that are negative, that I would find negative, I wouldn't celebrate. But one thing they do have is that they do have social cohesion. They do have those things that supposedly Jesus Christ talked about, like helping your neighbor. If someone's struggling, you help them. If they need food, you give them food. You don't just tell them to not take welfare because it's my money and all this shit that you see in the so-called civilized places of the West. Like I said, there's good and bad to everything. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, insofar as religion can serve as like truly helping people to put their focus on things that do help others, and not things that are just navel gazing, that are about just self gratification. And that's why I can see like there are these people who say like the West is kind of is degenerate because of like all these things. Like there is, or sometimes you'll hear the these so-called Islamic countries say like the West is they have too much freedom, and that's something I've struggled with that concept, because on the one hand, like, I don't want to believe that there's such a thing as too much freedom. But in the context of what I've just been saying, clearly there is, right? Like I said, if people don't know how to self-regulate, don't have self-discipline, then yeah, a lot of people will use that freedom to do things that hurts themselves and others, right? Uh, Whether it's, we all know that there's a lot of obesity in the U.S., and despite certain people wanting to, like, somehow make obesity out to be, like, nothing at all, like, it doesn't have medical problems, it's fat phobia, to say that extreme obesity comes with medical problems. It does. And no, it's not all a genetic disorder. A lot of people want to pretend it's all about genetics. No, it's not all about genetics. Maybe for, a certain amount of people, they will genetically tend towards being larger, but for a lot of people, again, it's lack of self-discipline. If you eat McDonald's 5 times a day and you drink a gallon of Coca-Cola, you're going to become very obese. And if you change those habits, you won't be obese. It's not, you know, it's not genetics. It is a lack of self-discipline. And so, yeah, I mean, all of these things. So whether it's in that context, or again, entertainment, or let's see, I guess another subject I wanted to mention, which is another one that I frankly also like had a hard time kind of like coming to terms with, the legalization of some of these drugs, right? Obviously, we've seen weed become legalized in many different states in the U.S. over the past 10 years now. And on the one hand, I've always, said it shouldn't be the government's interest of what people want to put in their body and all that. So yeah, again, the concept of freedom, right? People should have that as a matter of freedom. But again, I have to admit that, some of those, like, those propaganda ads that like the anti, where are those anti, yeah, Dare or whatever, those anti-drug groups would put out. Like, I remember this one commercial or ad of like these kids who are smoking weed, and they just sit on the sofa, and then they like become like like become part of the sofa or some shit. I don't know how to describe it. They just like melt into the sofa. I mean, frankly, again, like, there is truth to that. There are people who um again, overdo it. Not in the sense of like weed being addictive in the same way as like an opiate or alcohol. Like, it may not be addictive in the same way in like a physical sense, but even if it's not, like, it can still be overindulged, and people can become dependent on it, and frankly, like, the way it's described in those ads, that it makes, I think one of those ads did say like it makes you boring or something, because all you do is, yeah, sit on the sofa and smoke weed. There's truth to that, for a lot of people, especially, yeah, now that it is more accessible and it's legal in a lot of places. There are a lot of people who, again, go to that as their bread and circuses release or whatever. And you know that's what I'm saying. It's tough because, like, yeah, where is that line? Where's the line between uh just enjoying something and becoming dependent on it, and being led by it, like I said, you know to the point that, and so that's the thing, it's like a cumulative problem, like, within, for with just whether you're talking about like an individual or on the level of a society. It's like, yeah, it's easy to say each individual thing is not a big deal, but clearly, in the aggregate, if everyone's off being, distracted to death or whatever, being having all their energy and whatever being drained into these all these different things, like, yeah, no wonder nothing changes. I mean, why would it? That's kind of the thing. It's like, and yeah, I kind of have become somewhat suspicious about the whole legalization thing too. I don't think it's a coincidence, that all of a sudden um, it's becoming more and more accepted, and even now they're talking about, like, what, psilocybin, mushrooms or whatever. Same thing. Like, it's a double-edged sword. It's like, on the one hand, yeah, I'm sure it can help people with certain things, or it's better than being on like crack or some shit, or on meth or whatever. But again, it's like, can also just be another, a way to escape. Like, this escapism, I think, has really taken hold. I mean, that's just another way to describe all these things, whether it's the gaming, the entertainment, the drugs, whatever. It's just, everyone just wants to escape now. And if everyone's escaping, then no one's facing, you know, what's in front of them, and then nothing changes, and that's the frustration I've really been grappling with, because while I can understand to some extent like the desire to escape, I mean I definitely can understand that, and I can understand even people who are like from like a more spiritual perspective, like whether it's like, oh, you know, Earth is all fucked up. I'm just gonna go to heaven anyway, or whatever you want to say. Whatever it is. Like there still is, like I said, clearly there is that part of me that is like there are these concrete things happening. They can be changed, in theory, if people were to do something like, together, collectively work together to change certain things. They could be changed. They're not necessarily set in stone, but because um, you know because that doesn't happen for all these various reasons. People don't come together and want to work on certain things, put their effort towards those things. They don't happen, and so it's like, yeah, the discrepancy between, that they could be things could happen in theory, but they don't happen in practice because of the limitations of the human condition. So, like I said, whether you want to call it sin, or as like in Buddhism, call it defilement and delusion, you know it's been something I've definitely had to like come to terms with, and like let go of like that those expectations, because yeah, it just causes me, you know pain also to feel that, I mean, feel disappointed. I mean, that's really what I've felt a lot lately, is like just disappointed. And that's like wanting, like feeling like people could improve things, but that they're just so lost in all of these things that they just can't even see it. They can't even see how lost they are and how off the mark they are, and that just takes so many different forms, whether it's, being manipulated, like I've talked about before, into, issues that are just contrived, whether it's just being, lost in the escapism of not even just entertainment and drugs, but also, like I said, it could take the form of religion, could take the form of atheism, intellectualism, academia. I mean, God, that shit is also like just as much of just a way to escape. Just if you've ever been around those like super intellectual people who love to just debate for the sake of debating, like I can't stand that shit. Like I've gone to certain meetups and stuff where of people discussing just like philosophy and stuff, and like I was really turned off by it, because my approach to philosophy is like, I guess you could say, pragmatic. That yeah, I'm interested in it because I'm interested in what it can do to make a difference in people's lives, not because I find it interesting to talk for the sake of talking, or debate for the sake of debating. And I think that's where I kind of like, had to, again, became disillusioned with all that too. Even like with, yeah, the atheist crowd, like they love to talk for the sake of talking, not because, you know it's really useful in that sense. Because like I said, I mean, if you're gonna be pragmatic, or talk about things that as they affect people in reality, it doesn't help anyone to just shit on like people who believe in God, or to shit on religion as a whole, because it doesn't. I'm just not convinced that they're much different in a lot of ways. If they believe, atheists believe in other things that can probably be called also like speculative. I mean, that's kind of what Max Stirner talks about. I think that was my last video where Max Stirner says, like, even if someone's an atheist, they could still believe in all these different things that may or may not be based in like reality either. And yeah, I also wanted to just mention like the new age stuff. Again, I don't if people can believe whatever they want to believe, but there is a side to it that it is like escapist. It is, a way for certain people to try and make money. I mean, that's where I always get suspicious when there's people selling shit all the time, pushing their books and their, whatever stuff or products or whatever it is, when it is just as speculative as, a religious type thing. I mean, like, even like the astrology stuff, I mean, I don't know, just personally, like, I don't know why I don't need, some like configuration of stars to tell me things about myself. I mean, I learn about, myself by observing myself, like, or observing like what kinds of people I'm compatible with or not. I don't know why I would need, you know, this external thing to tell me that, So it's like it is a realm, just like with traditional religion. It's another realm that can be easily used to take advantage of people. People who want to, sell shit to people or want to be in a position of authority. It's easy to do it in that realm too. There's all of these like gurus and shit, and people pay a lot of money to like try to find enlightenment through these gurus or whatever, and it's like I just find it kind of sad because it's like, like I said, I've been like studying like Buddhism and like traditional Buddhism, which unfortunately has become really conflated with a lot of new age shit just because of like the practice of like meditation and mindfulness. Like those things have become really mainstream in recent decades, and so like sometimes Buddhism will get mixed in with other new age things, or like things like yoga and chakras and this and that. But really, like, traditional Buddhism is really basic, and you don't need to pay anyone anything. um so yeah, I mean, when you see how many things there are now, these different things, yoga and, the gurus and what retreats, I mean, just so much shit. It's like, I don't know, it's like, yeah, it's like, there do people, with disposable incomes, like I feel like a lot of those people almost feel like if something is free, like it must not be worth anything. Like if they're not paying a bunch of money to learn these esoteric secrets, it must not be worth anything. I mean, think about how fucked up that is. It's like that's what society has become. Like anything worth having is gonna cost money. I guess that's the mentality now, and I don't know. I mean, that's the thing, and it's like, and that's the point. It's like, so, underlying all the entertainment and whatever, all the bread and circuses. I mean, underlying that is they all have, they all generate profit for somebody. If people aren't satisfied with, cultivating their life as it is without needing to consume all of these different things, certain people would not be making bank the way they are. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we know all these media companies are like profitable as shit, and it's like, I just get fucking irritated seeing how many people, like, even people who like talk about it, and then they're like, oh, and I have Disney Plus, I have this and that. It's like, you can't even help yourself. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, people will like in one breath talk about how problematic it is that these media companies own, like, there's only like what, three or four that control like all the media in not just even the US but in like the world, and then they're just like still consuming it, and like, people can't even help themselves. I mean, that's what I'm saying. you know it's just like they're just so far gone. It's like there's nothing else. People just want to. People seem to feel like they just accept that as the norm now, um, and yeah, I mean even things like the sports obviously and whatever. It's like it's so ubiquitous, and it's like um, yeah, I don't know. It's like do people think there was never a time before all of this stuff? What imagine like what did people do before all of this all of this like entertainment and whatnot. I mean, and so uh yeah, I mean this is a good segue to I actually was looking into like oh crap, what are they called? The Amish, sorry. I forgot, my brain fucking froze. But yeah, like the Amish and the Mennonites. Um, because I've heard a lot about them, but hadn't really looked into like the details. But as I was looking into like more of the details about them from people who like actually grew up in like Amish or Mennonite communities, just like I was saying earlier, I don't agree with all of it, but there's definitely parts of it that I really can relate to, and I think would be kind of I would find personally I would find desirable. It's kind of deep, like it really is. It's not just rules. And I can, even if I don't agree with all of the rules that they have, I can at least understand why they have them, and they make sense in the context of their practices, right? So like one of the things they talked about was how like the reason they're very strict about what they're known for, like not using electricity. Well, first of all, there's a lot of different sects within even that, and there are some that do use electricity. There's some who do have like modern cars, so first of all, yeah, there's variants and all that. But for the ones who do keep the more traditional side, who still are using like horse-drawn buggies, and not using electricity, or very limited electricity and technology. And the reason behind that is that they see technology as just um, changing, fundamentally changing their relationship to land and to life. Another thing, people take for granted is like the speed at which life goes, right? And that's where even like cars come in, because think about it, cars are, they go really fast. That's what they do, and we've become so used to it because we don't know anything else. um but that's one reason they don't like using technology, because it does just like make things faster. But they're really getting at the heart of like what is the purpose of life, or of even work. Like, is it just to do as much as you possibly can, as fast as you can? How does that affect your relationship with it? Because the reality is, the reason things have become faster and faster in modern society is because, again, it's profitable. Of course, it's the faster you can do shit, the faster employees can do whatever they're doing, the more money can be made, right? So again, like I think there's something I find intriguing, and like actually that I kind of I like about the whole Amish, the traditional Amish view of that. Because yeah, I really don't like the pace that society goes to. And I've like always kind of felt that way, but I never, since there's no one else who talks about it, I always kind of just thought I was, of course I'm the crazy one. I don't like, to be honest, I've never liked I've never liked like freeways. Like the concept to me of like cars going like 70 miles per hour on a freeway to me has always been weird. And so, I always just thought I was just, whatever. I just, like I said, I didn't have any like way to understand that because there's nothing else out there. But, I just don't understand why things have to go that fast. I don't know. Like, you can get to a place slower. It doesn't have to be that fast. And obviously, if you look at, like, there's these videos of, like, Market Street in San Francisco, like, 100 years ago, and there's, like, horse-drawn carriages, there are automobiles, there's people walking and biking all in the middle of the street. There weren't crosswalks, there weren't, the lanes in the street. It looks chaotic, but actually it works because even the automobiles are going at a slow rate of speed, so it's not dangerous. Even if there's people walking and there's kids biking and all that stuff in the same place, because it's slowed down. You have more room for like variety. And this is like a whole rabbit hole that I got into recently about like the effect that making cities car centric has dramatically changed society, and that it's so hostile to people who don't want to have cars, or who walk. If you want like a walkable way of life, it's not doable in so many places, most places in the U.S. at least now, because it's because so much deference is in priority is given to motor vehicles. Because again, like I said, the reason why is because it's profitable ultimately. And so it's people don't think about things like that. The effect that has. Having technology, making things easier, to what end? And so I can really respect like the whole Amish thing in that regard, because I mean, it's like I said, to me I think there are profound things that get lost when things are made easier and faster just for the sake of it, or for mainly for the sake of profit. And then once people become used to it, it's like they don't question it anymore. So it makes sense that they want to preserve their way of life, and they have to be somewhat separated from society to do that. Because and I definitely respect that, compared to people like the average Christians out here who want to bitch and complain about always things related to sex and sexuality and this and that. Don't like this, don't like that. It's like, well, then do something, you bitch. Like, take responsibility and do something to maintain what you believe. Like, you want to complain about the media and then watch the media. It's like, what the fuck else do you expect? It's so stupid. It's like, at least, like, everything else aside, at least the Amish are willing to put their I don't know, not money where their mouth is, but they're willing to actually take responsibility, and that's what's missing from so many people. It's like people want the freedom, but they don't want the responsibility, and that's again like this dialectic that if you want freedom, you have to take on the responsibility for it. And I think that's also why people are so content to just like, I don't know, to just like keep doing the same things over and over, voting and just, these stupid things that don't work, but they don't want to do anything else. They don't want to take the responsibility to change anything. And they'd rather just escape from everything with the bread and circuses, you know. I mean, like I said, and that's like what I've been saying. Like, if you don't have the self-discipline to like limit yourself, then you'll be, you'll need an external source to come in and dictate to you what the limit is, right? you know if you lack that internal discipline and the willingness to take responsibility for your actions, I mean, There's just a lot of people who will do things and then they'll turn around and like blame other people, right? Like whether it's like people who go skydiving and then they break a leg and then they turn around and try to sue the company that they broke their leg. It's like, well, what did you think was gonna happen? Like, why can't you just accept certain things can happen if you take certain actions? Like, why do you have to blame everyone else for your choices? And that's why we can't have true like freedom, because it would require people to have self-regulation, self-discipline, and take responsibility. And clearly, most people don't want that. Then that's why we have we have government and all that shit, because most people don't seem to really want to take that responsibility, and they would rather have, whether it's like a religious authority or a secular governmental authority come in and tell them like these are the limits. And that just sucks for those of us who really don't need that kind of discipline externally imposed on us, because a lot of it is very arbitrary. If you're someone who really is willing to take responsibility for your choices, not cry and turn around and blame someone for not protecting you from your own choices. I mean, that's really what we see all the time now. Like even things like people who want to choose like if they don't want to have kids, they want to have like sterilization procedures. It's really hard to do that for a lot of people because of people who got those procedures and then changed their mind and then turned around and sued the doctors or whoever for doing the procedure. No wonder we can't have, like legitimate, you know, freedom, because people can't even take responsibility for their own choices. I mean, just like, yeah, just like everything else, we can't have, I mean, even, yeah, even things like, I don't know how, if this is an unpopular opinion or not, but like alcohol, like, you know, I don't agree with, ideally, I don't think there needs to be these hard restrictions around alcohol. I mean, we know there's a lot between, places that sell alcohol need a license, they need to, they have to check ID, they have to do this and that, the age. The minimum age to drink alcohol in the U.S. is 21, which is like one of the highest in the world. It's like, why? It's not necessary in reality, but it's been kind of, yeah, again, it's been ruined by people who, refuse to take responsibility for their choices, who lack, just genuine self-discipline. Um, I mean, why would it be, why would it be that 16-year-olds can drink alcohol in France but not in the U.S.? Is there, why would it be, it's not a real thing, but, that's why we have, I guess what some people call like the nanny government. Like, clearly a lot of people do want a nanny. I mean, that's it. That's why we have that, because and that's what's frustrating, because it's like different issues, right? You'll have the people who, like I said, who want to like force people into like traditionalism, who want all the kids to be, forced into Christianity, and or they want the government to protect them from every bad thing that could ever happen, or to protect them from drugs, to protect them from, whatever, from obscenity in the media. It's like all these different things, right? Like between the whole false, Democrat Republican thing. It's like they both want a nanny. It's just on different issues. And it's like that's what's so goddamn frustrating. It's like they both want a nanny just in different ways. And so it's like, God, what a fucking mess. I don't know. One side wants to, limit what you can read, and the other side wants to limit, wants to say what medical interventions you have to have, what you can and can't do, or if your kids should have to have to go to school in general, or if they have to have whatever medical interventions, or they have to. I mean, I don't know. It's just so much, but um, yeah, I don't know. That was all a cascade off of the Amish thing. But anyway, I guess I was just saying, like, yeah, I respect them because, like I said, they have a purpose. They know why they do what they do. They know what they want. They're willing to take responsibility, the good and the bad. They're willing to put it into practice. If people, I mean, that's what I'm saying. They just have real integrity. Um, and so many people are lacking that. They do want someone else to blame. Something goes wrong, they want to turn around and blame somebody else. You'll never have, you know, true freedom if that's how you behave. Because again, it does come down to, a certain amount of like self mastery and self discipline and taking responsibility is part of that. Um, I don't know. But I'm trying to think, was there something? I think there's something else about the Amish too. It's like, um, yeah, I mean, I guess, like I said, in general, that's another thing. Like I was saying, how those parts of religion make sense to me, even if I'm not interested in following anyone's, particular religion. I find parts of it that are um, definitely useful and make sense. Um, and so I guess, like again, with bread and circuses, how it's so normalized in society, and so you have this discourse about like people who like extreme religion or extreme beliefs or cults or whatever you want to call them, and how certain beliefs are definitely kind of demonized, right? I mean, like I mentioned, like certain states, I guess like California, you're like required, like you can't even really like homeschool your kids, like they still have to be homeschooled according to the California state's curriculum or some shit. And there's a lot of people on the one side, you might say the Democrat leaning side especially, but I mean, let's be honest, I don't think it's even just them, because I mean, that's what I'm saying. There's a bias towards like the normalcy of like like say American society in general, like there, and then there's like a bias against like say, a group like the Amish, or even say like Jehovah's Witnesses, because they're a minority. Then people will always want to say like, oh, it's a cult and it's this and that, and there be like, I just saw this, like there was like this thing that was said like, there was like an article like, do Jehovah's Witnesses embarrass their kids? And like I was just saying, well, if you have you know what you want, why is that shameful? Like, that's what I'm trying to say, is like the bias of like normalcy, like just like I said. So if normalcy now is just you know stuffing your face, becoming extremely obese, watching football, smoking weed, and watching porn for 12 hours, like if that's considered normal in society, why would it be bad for someone to go in the other direction and be like, I'm gonna actually have principles? You might not like them. They might be, um, I mean, just because they're divergent from the norm doesn't make them bad. And like I said, I can respect someone who has that integrity, because yeah, it is easy to just go along with the mainstream and not have to like not have that integrity and self-discipline to know what you want, and to say like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. I don't care if I'm a minority, if it's considered abnormal or uncool or whatever by the majority, but I'm going to do it. I think there is a lot of good in that. And again, not to say it's all great. Like, of course, anytime, especially when there is like a structure of authority, like there are in most religions or whatever. Of course, there's always going to be potential for abuse there too, and that's its own thing. I mean, it's the same thing, right? It's like if people are not, you know, I mean, like I said, it's different sections. So, like I said, if someone truly values themselves, they won't be led into something that is harmful to them. Um, and I mean, you could say the same in relation, like for a small group like the Amish in relation to like society at large. Like they stand up for themselves like as a group, but of course within that group, like of course it has its own issues, like you know, and it's a matter of what people value, like what people are willing to do, and all of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like so yeah, I mean, like Jehovah's Witnesses, like I know they get a lot of shit even from other, like the more mainstream Christians, right? And I was also thinking about this, right? Christianity in the U.S. Um, I find it hideous, and it's mainly because the mainstream Christians have adopted the values of like just the mainstream American society, whether they can recognize that or not, but they adapt pretty much. In my opinion, the worst things about it, they they compromise parts of like Christianity that would be in conflict with like American culture. So, main example being militarism. It's like you people claim to worship Jesus, which which part, where did Jesus talk about having like 900 military bases all over the world and creating multi-million dollar bombs and bomber planes, destroyer ships, aircraft like where did Jesus talk about that? Where did Jesus talk about invading other countries and bombing people, and they don't want you there obviously, and just going in and claiming to I don't know. It's like it's just so deeply hypocritical, but how many of these motherfuckers actually care about that? And I think um, Lucy was talking about this in one of her videos about like religion, but back in like the Vietnam War era in the 60s, early 70s, there were some like Christian churches that came out against the war in Vietnam, and they're the sorry sorry, too much soda. Actually, not, it wasn't soda, it was kombucha, which is also fizzy. Anyway, so okay, if I can stop burping for a second, but yeah, um, so yeah, it's like so the people in a lot of these churches, right? For example, like these Protestant churches, like Lutherans and other Protestant sects of Christianity, like they actually got like upset with like if their pastor was like preaching against the war in Vietnam. The people got upset, and that's when like the whole evangelical movement really started to become large in the U.S. Was because a lot of those people were offended that their pastor was preaching against war, and they wanted a Christianity that was again in alignment with American values, which is apparently bombing, raping, and pillaging people on the other side of the earth. So I mean, that's the thing. Like, what the fuck is going on? They totally made Christianity into something that's like not even recognizable. Like, I do not for a second think that, you know, that if Jesus saw what most of these American Christians were doing, that he would like it. I mean, it just goes against everything that they claim to believe in, and they somehow rationalize it in their minds. And that's what happens, because they want certain things that, American society had to offer. They wanted the comfort of the middle class, of the spoils of war. The things that America has because of its militarism, they want that shit. They don't give a fuck how they got it, but they want it. And so everything else that they supposedly believe in Christianity, the things that are inconvenient with that, they just throw out the fucking window and go on pretending like nothing changed when it did change. So that's what I'm saying. And so like the Amish are like explicitly against militarism. Clearly they don't participate in they're like I guess they've been lucky in that they've at least been given some protected status, and I don't think they've been harassed to enlist in all these wars over these years. But as far as like even Jehovah's Witnesses, apparently they also don't participate in they don't participate in war, and they don't even participate in like politics or in voting. I'm not sure exactly how deep it goes, but again, a lot of people on like in both the Democratic and Republican sides would say, "Oh, boo-hoo, you're not doing your civic duty, you're not voting, you're not serving your country." Well, guess what? Like, they actually have principles and they're willing to stand by them. And they can see that this, the mainstream, like, American ideology is not in alignment with the principles they claim to have. And they're actually willing to follow through with it. Imagine someone actually following through with what they claim to believe in and not throwing it out the goddamn window when it's not convenient, when it comes into conflict with the American religion. I mean, there was this podcast that talked about like the American civil religion, and it is its own religion. It's an ideology. That's the problem. People trying to come to terms with these ideologies, which one they're gonna follow, which parts they want to follow and which they are willing to get rid of, because if the whole "thou shalt not kill" thing is too inconvenient to America needing to sustain itself through warfare, then we know what most American Christians seem to have chosen. And so yeah, I mean, like I said, for whatever problems there are with the Jehovah's Witnesses or whoever, the Amish, like, there is something about that I relate to, just having like the integrity, not going along with the tide, because I don't find much respectable about going along with like the mainstream, the tide, the whatever you want to call it. I don't know. I don't see much benefit in it other than the feeling of being part of the the herd. The comfort that comes with like feeling like you're in the majority and that you're comfortable. I mean, that's the irony. I mean, I fall into a lot of these minority groups or identities or whatever you want to call them, and I mean, that's the ironic similarity I have with like even a group like the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Amish, that they're also a minority, and there is a certain integrity just in that concept, whether to whatever extent I would agree with all their beliefs or not. There's something to that, because yeah, I mean, like I said, from a different my own perspective, I don't see much good in the mainstream society either. So it's like, when you have these narratives that demonize like anyone who questions the sacred cows of, whether it's like again, like the militarism, the even yeah, the media culture, entertainment culture, there is this tendency to want to say like, oh, you're strange because you don't want to just sit and watch the fucking Super Bowl or whatever, you know. I mean, or even the fact that like, yeah, science has been made like the mainstream belief now. You know, obviously it was a certain kind of religion for a long time, and I guess after the so-called, enlightenment in the so-called Western world, it shifted from like, the thing that the masses were supposed to believe in, shifted from religion to like secularism and to science and all that stuff, and technology, of course. So it's like, yeah, again, like, I mean, yeah, we certainly see that. Haven't we seen that over the past 3 years, but actually longer than that if you question what's called modern medicine, modern science? God help you, you're, made out to be a horrible, deviant person who just, whatever. And I guess that's another similarity. The supposedly Jehovah's Witnesses don't, yeah, they mostly don't believe in a lot of like modern medicine. And again, I'm not saying I totally agree with that, but again, they have principles and they're willing to stick by them, whatever it is. Um, and like I said, there is a benefit to that, um, for sure. And, you know, it's, hmm. Yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting how that works, how certain things become like the accepted norm and then other things are like demonized. But it's still just so complicated because, again, like, I'm not even saying that because something is like a minority, or that just because something isn't the mainstream that it's good, because a lot of people have been talking about this too. The people who are like, oh shit, I just learned that the mainstream media lies to me. Oh, let me go find an alternative media and believe everything. No, that's also bullshit. And that's why, like, no wonder people are so lost. People cannot discern all of these things. Like, they want to have something to hold on to. Like, they want to be able to say, like, oh, if the mainstream lies, then this Joe Blow outlet, you know online must be telling me the truth. And it's like, it's not that simple either. Because, like, I mean, like I said, with anything, like, you have the new age, which is like, I can understand why a lot of people are trying this new age stuff, because they are turned off by like traditional Christianity or whatever. But then, yeah, you can still have the same things happen. You can have the shysters and the grifters, people trying to just sell shit and use people. And so, unfortunately, like, yeah, it comes down to people really having to take it upon themselves to, develop their own discernment, develop, their values and what they want. If they want to be led by someone, I mean, they can choose that if they want. But and again, that comes with its own consequences, and maybe you have to just if you'd prefer someone else to give you rules and to tell you what to do, you also have to, the ride or die with that. You have to accept the consequences of that. Um, I mean, because I was thinking about this too, because I'm not even here saying that um, it's necessarily better to be purely independent, like to not be dependent, because, like I said, everything has its positives and negatives, and I can see how even, and I guess this goes back to the religion thing. Like, if people are dependent on a religion, it can be bad, but there's also positives like that. Yeah, they feel like they're given parameters and limits if they feel they can't personally come up with them. But clearly, the downside is, yeah, it could be led to like a suicide cult or some shit. I don't know, or whatever, or just people in power abusing the power over people, abusing their power over other people in those sects or groups or whatever. And because, like, even just like take like a relationship, right? There's always like, there's that whole debate about uh, within these circles about traditionalism and you know obviously like the gender roles that a woman's supposed to be dependent and the man is like the leader. And so it's like, so even if like, I mean, I can see how there's benefit in being dependent, because there's benefit to, not everyone wants to have to make all the decisions all the time. Like I can see there being an appeal to people who want to be dependent. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter if they're a man or woman. Um, Someone who wants to be like dependent in a relationship, like there is something to that. They yeah, like I said, if they don't want to have to make decisions, then obviously they'll be drawn to that. Um, and like I said, just like with adhering to a religion, the downside is that if the person you're dependent on makes bad decisions, and I guess you're like going down with the ship, basically. And I feel like that dynamic repeats itself a lot, whether it's like people dependent, on a religion, on the government, on an ideology, political ideology, socialism, capitalism, communism, like all of these things, or dependent on academia, on science, everything. Like when someone wants if they want to depend on something, there's always the downside that if that thing is wrong, then you're gonna go down with the ship. If you, to the extent that you are willing to reevaluate and change course, if and realize that something may not be leading you in a good direction anymore, the direction you want to go in. And I guess the last thing I feel like I've been ranting for so long now, but the last thing I'll talk about is again this concept of like dependence and authority. So and also just like I said, people not being able to like manage, like discipline themselves, right? And so like it's funny, like um I've like looked into a lot of these different like political ideologies. Like I've looked into like the libertarianism, anarcho-capitalism, all of that, the type of free market um, capitalism stuff, and then also like socialism, communism, and then that type of stuff. And so I find that there is this similarity that they have on that's, or well, yeah, whatever you want to call it, like people who want traditionalism, or people who want um, or who want capitalism, or who hate capitalism. There is this like, there is a tendency towards like authoritarianism, because of that very reason, that if people are left to their own devices, they kind of just get lost in all these things. And so like, that's what I'm saying. The irony is like both like communists and like capitalists. There are variations. So there's people who don't want like any authoritarianism. Or they're like the libertarian side of like both like a socialist or a capitalist ideology. But there's also those who both want like more rules and want more authority, um, because yeah, if people are left to their own devices, you don't know what they're gonna do. Like they're unpredictable. So yeah, it makes sense for them to desire authority, because that's how you can try to bend people to your will. Now, like whether that's how effective that is or not is obviously in question, but there's again like, if people are malleable, like they, if they're left to their own devices, they can go off in a million directions, and you want them to be going in your direction. I mean, you don't have much choice but to try and like reduce their like liberty or their freedom to make all these choices, right? And so because one thing I've seen is like when I was hanging out with like or not hanging out, but like looking into like communism. There are these communist groups that they'll demonize like capitalism, like they'll demonize, right, for example, abortion being criminalized in wherever in the US or other parts of the world, and they'll say like, oh, this is fascist, for abortion to be illegal. However, on their side, they may not want abortion to be illegal, but they want a lot of other things to be illegal. Like they want, they want to say like what's normal and not normal, getting into this whole, again, this concept of like, oh, if people have too much freedom, they'll just destroy themselves, and if they're destroying themselves, then they can't lead the revolution and to overthrow, to fight the fascists or whatever. And so we have to set rules again. So it's like on both sides, you have the same things. Both of them saying that, yeah, people can't be left to their own devices because they're unpredictable, and if you're trying to impose a certain order, whether it's like capitalist or communist, then yeah, they both want to set those parameters, and I think it's just funny how that works. It's like I don't see. Yeah, I mean, if you look at it objectively, there's not a lot of difference other than just the economic aspect. Like they both, right? It's like, so for example, a lot of like socialists will hold up Cuba as a positive example of like a socialist revolution, but Cuba, doesn't allow free speech. Like they justify it by saying, well, free speech will lead to undermining, our values, our like socialist, agenda values that we want. And so yeah, we don't allow free speech because and that's how we have there were all these refugees, because like a lot of the refugees from Cuba were people who the government just said were like subversive for whatever reason, or that they have the wrong values. They have capitalist values or whatever. Same thing happened in the Soviet Union. There were people, even like children, who were forced to try to sell stuff, sometimes even even like like young kids, yes, out on the streets selling whatever they had to try to get money because they were starving, because the government, was like dictating that all the food go to the military, and they would try to sell whatever they had to get money to buy food for their families, and then the government would tell them that, oh, you're engaging in capitalism, and so you have to go. They would throw them in jail for practicing capitalism, and that's just, and this was, the Bolshevik, supposed revolution that was supposedly going to free them. They believed they were freeing people from capitalism, and it's like, so this is what happened. I'm like, this is what you call freedom, is being jailed for being forced into this situation. I mean, it's a mess, and it happens on both sides. That's how it goes. I mean, yeah, it's a mess. It's, just like we have now. Like, yeah, there are people who, obviously the left-right thing is, really misused and abused, but there are a lot of people who do, what's the word I'm looking for? Who do idealize now fascism. I mean, I had a friend, in the last couple years, who actually like really went off the deep end, who started saying like Hitler did nothing wrong and all this shit. Like he really started identifying with fascism and or Nazism, because again, same thing, the idea that people are just too unpredictable and they just need order to be forced on them, you know Um, so it's like, there are a lot of people who do seem to be drifting towards that to preserve, to preserve capitalism in that case, right? And so that's what I'm saying. It's just like, I don't know. As far as humanity goes, it's like you can't win. It's like everyone ends up coming back to the same things. Whatever they claim their ideology is, they come back to like wanting a leader to enforce things on other people. Even while they themselves, lack discipline in most cases, they won't even take responsibility for what they do. And they won't allow other people to make their own choices, and it's like just a mess. I don't even know how else to describe it, but I guess that's why I just said, letting go of humanity in the sense of, you know, I can't make sense of this mess. I can't. And if I try to, hold on to that, and if I try to, yeah, I mean, there's just no benefit to being attached to that, to all these things that I had believed, or just the desire to see things change, right? But like I said, the problem is people do have to change it themselves. There's no like, it's not like all these movies and this media were fed of like heroes, like who can come in like a singular hero figure who can save the day for everyone. That's not reality, and no wonder that kind of stuff is fed to people, because people, again, a lot of people want someone else to save them. They don't want to take on their own responsibility to help themselves, to change themselves, and to do anything. But yeah, that's not how it works. People have to do it themselves. And yeah, no matter how much like I, feel like things could change, if only people could see it. I can't bank on that. Like I said, just from the things I've seen, I think it's more realistic to think most people, aren't gonna change in that way anytime soon. And so I just have to accept that. And I guess it's still difficult for me. I still feel kind of disappointed. A lot of times with people doing the same things over and over, but like I said, I don't know what else I can do. So, um, yeah, to be honest, like I know some of these people, keep saying those things like, we need to get people to see this, to see that, and to understand this and that, but I get what I've been trying to say this whole time is just that, yeah, there's just so many things that go into, human behavior and psychology. It's just not that as simple as like, oh, if people only knew about this thing, if we only get this information to people, then they'll do this and they'll do that. It's like you can never, you can really can't bank on any of those assumptions. It's so complicated. People's ability to, I mean, a lot of people just don't seem to want to face things that are difficult, and that's why we have all of this escapist media and everything else that I talked about. Um, yeah, I mean, I'll probably try to talk about technology more at some point, because, like I said, I think it has become worse even just in the last 20 years, and I don't know, there's just so much navel gazing, and I think the thing about technology, like the internet specifically, is that it seems to approximate like human connection, and so people kind of like, like I do see a lot of people saying like, oh, it's great, I can talk to someone who's on the other side of the world and this and that. But the downside is again, like, how real is that? Just because you do that one thing, does it mean, what things have you lost? And I think there has been a lot that's been lost in terms of like genuine connection, and it has fed into just this perpetual online stuff. And people just putting their energy into those things instead of things that would be more effective uh, in real life, just because it can feel like you're doing something without actually doing very much. And yeah, just a lot to think about there. I might add a link to this video about like the whole car thing, the car-centrism I mentioned earlier, because I think that's pretty interesting and something I hadn't heard much about either, but I think it's worth considering. Or just like I said about the Amish, like, yeah, I mean, really considering, what's lost by a lot of these things. We're told it's progress, we're told technology is always progress, or whatever things, or even things like science and law and all of that, we're told that that's progress, but really, what is lost, and are is it really, yeah, are things inherently bad just because they seem old-fashioned or traditional? I think people can, ideally people can make their own decisions about that. Like I said, I wouldn't agree with a lot of things in a lot of traditional religions, but there's other things that I do appreciate. So, it's just one of those things. You're really stuck between a lot of different aspects there. So, with that, I will go ahead and end it there. I think I've gone on long enough. So, thanks for listening. Have a good one.